Hello, thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about aftermath of unfortunate decision by Google to drop Google Spaces. Google Spaces was their attempt into something that's kind of a small, quick um, collaboration tool with rich media and easy way for people to put something out there and respond to it, easily get different kinds of materials from the web and drop them right into Google Spaces. Anyway, bottom line, they're killing it after 9 months. And so the question for people who have used it, um, I'm being one of them, became how do you move the data out because they don't have any kind of exporting capabilities or tools. And they really didn't provide any way to exit. They just said they're going to be shutting it down. So that's what I'm going to talk about today is how you can move the data out from Google Spaces into another application. So let's get right into that. And I'm going to show you some examples, obviously not the only examples, but some things that you could be doing. Let me just jump right into the share here and show you. So if you go to Spaces, just pull up something. First of all, as you can see, they got this big sign that says Spaces will be discontinued on April 17th, and they're going to make it read-only sometime in March. I don't remember the date. But the idea is you want to make sure you do this before April in terms of getting all your data out, or you're going to lose it. So that's the first important thing to remember. And in the Spaces themselves, if you never use Spaces, obviously we're not going to go through it because don't start using it now because it's going to be going away. But if you've used it, you already know what you can put in and things you can have, things like that. So obviously we won't cover that. But if you look at Spaces in terms of the capabilities, you see that you can create entries. You can have people respond to these entries by putting in additional comments, and you can enter either links or images or videos and text. And of course, you can share it and have multiple people collaborating on it. If you look at Google Plus and its capabilities, you can see that by going to communities, you have a very similar situation, capability, whatever you want to call it. For example, if you go to a community, you also have an environment where you can create entries. In this case, it's posts. And at the same time, you can also have people make comments. And when initially Spaces started, you could not make comments with links and images, but now you can. So basically, it's very similar to Spaces from that standpoint. Anybody can join. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. Anybody who is allowed can join a community, and the community can have a number of categories, which of course you can make it simple, keep it just one category, or you can have multiple categories, whatever works best for you. And then you can invite certain people to be part of it. And then, of course, people can also comment and in their comments, they can enter links and images and videos. And so from that standpoint, it makes it very similar. And even though there's a little bit more setup on Google Plus communities than would be in Google Spaces, essentially you can mimic it to be pretty much the same thing. I mean, I maintained from the beginning when Spaces came out that it's a essentially a simplified or easier to use, easier to set up way to do the same thing you do in communities, but you know, you don't have any of the overhead that communities have, and it was a nice tool to have. Now that it's going away, if you think about going backwards, then you can say same thing going the other way, that since they are very similar, just a little bit more work to set up a community, but they're very similar in capabilities, you could move your space information from there back into communities. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is you could potentially use something like Google Keep. And Google Keep, of course, is their note-taking program. But if you think about Google Keep, this is where you can move information because you can put graphics, you can put images, you can have links. I mean, all of that is done in Google Keep Notes, so you can just transfer information that way. When I say transfer, you have to do it manually. Like I said, there is no tool to move it. So you're going to have to do this manually, but it's fairly easy to copy and paste things. And that way you could potentially move information and create, just like you had an item on Google Space, you can have a similar item, if you will, on Google Keep, and then you can have all the information within the replies, everything else going here. The difference being is that you can share a note with multiple people, but if you're going to be creating multiple notes, that means every single note will need to be separately shared with whatever your team is. So it really is not as good from collaboration standpoint, if you, especially if you have a lot of information, as it would be if you used, for example, Google Communities. I mean, Google Plus Communities. Those would be more appropriate. But potentially, you can see how you can mimic the environment here too, and you can move your data here, at least temporarily, just so you don't lose it. And hopefully, Google won't shut down Keep anytime soon. Anyway, that's the hope. But what I'm going to talk today about in more detail is something called Airtable. And you get there by going to airtable.com. So Airtable is an online cloud-based, however you want to call it, database application, and it allows you to, it actually has some really nice capabilities as databases go. And if you're not familiar with databases in general, I'm going to just take just a few minutes and start a new database just to show you what databases are about on a very rudimentary level. So I'm going to start a database from scratch. And let's just go with that. We'll call it HOA example. And open it up. And as you can see, it starts out with nothing there, basically. There's absolutely nothing there. And so before we get into what is it, database, you know, the name itself comes from two words, is data and base. So it's a base of data. It's a storage of data. In terms of what kind of data, you can have any kind of data you want. I mean, anything you can imagine that you want to store, you store in databases. And computer industry has used databases extensively from beginning of time, essentially, and people still use it now for all kinds of data storage. That's where you normally store data. Some people prefer to put data in spreadsheets. Some people put data somewhere else, but realistically speaking, if you're really serious about doing business data storage, you put it in databases because of the capabilities, because of the flexibility, because of the breadth of storage you can have and different kinds of storage you can have. Nothing really matches databases. So what is a data? Database is basically a collection of what's called records, which is similar information or related information. And then each record is broken down into what they call fields or columns to segregate the different types of data. So in our case, let's say, let's set up an example. We're going to use database of names and addresses. It's a pretty typical deal. So we're going to have records going down. So in many ways, the way they show it here is very similar to a spreadsheet. You have rows and you have columns. Rows are the records, columns are the fields. And so they already gave us, a couple sample ones here, so we'll change them. So we have name, so this would be person's name. Here we're going to have another field. We're going to have, let's call it address. So you just simply click on the plus on the right side there, and it says this is going to be single line text, which is fine. And you can have some kind of default text for it. In our case, we don't want any default. We just click on save. So to add fields or columns, all you do is you click on plus, indicate what you want it to be. Like in my case, I'm going to put in city. It's also single line of text, and then you click save. And then I'm going to add another field called state. And I'm going to take another field called zip code. And that zip code, let's say we're going to have, well, let's keep it, that's fine. Keep it like that. And then I didn't want to do that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another field called, let's say, phone number. Okay. Phone, and the phone number is going to be, let's select a number. So as I said before, each column or field in a database can have of a different type. So in other words, it's a different type of information that you're storing. And they have all kinds of different types. You can have alphanumeric, you can have numbers, you can have currency, you can have percents, formulas. There's a bunch of different things you can do. This particular tutorial is not meant to be tutorial on databases, so I'm just kind of really going over it for people who really have never done anything with databases, to give a brief overview, and then we'll get into the whole spaces thing, moving data from spaces. So in this particular case, I'm going to put in, let's put in the number, phone number here, and then perhaps we'll set up another field and call it comments, just a general comment field. And instead of having a single line of text, this particular I want it to be long text, meaning I can put long comments and save it. Okay. And so essentially what I've got, just get rid of the stuff they did. Essentially what I have is I have a what's called a name and address database. So we can keep track of people. So I can put in my name here, for example, the address, whatever it is. This would be in Bellevue, Washington, and the zip code is 98034, and phone number is A25, and interesting enough, they don't check it to make sure it's valid. That's interesting. Okay, we'll have to figure that part out later. And then if you type in just the digits, you can see it nicely formatted for you, and this is just a long comment with a bunch of text to show that you can have as much text as you wish need. Okay, so put a bunch of text in there. Okay, so now we have one record. Another record could be some other name. So we have, you know, Van Moskalansky, and he lives on 456 Boulevard in Redmond, Washington, 2. And just leave it blank. Okay, and so the idea, you can see the idea, you can fairly quickly set up a base of information or a database with related information. Related meaning these are all names and address records here. In other words, we don't have information such as where Ben ate at a restaurant, for example. So orders from a restaurant. That wouldn't make any sense to mix orders from a restaurant with this information here. It would make sense to link a separate database, or a separate base as they call it here, with information about all the orders, and that potentially will link to this particular table to indicate who the customer was, and the customers are in this name and address. That would make sense. But you would not mix order information from a restaurant, for example, with this name and address in the same database. Okay, so it's related information broken down into various pieces of data that could be of any type, you know, different kinds of types of data, and that's how it's stored. So that's kind of the basic idea behind databases, and you can see how fairly quickly you can set one up, and you can just enter the data in there, and then you can do all kinds of stuff with it afterwards, which is beyond the scope of what we're talking about. I just wanted to show you how to kind of initially set it up. So let's jump into spaces now and see what can we do with spaces with this. Well, if you look at spaces, like in this particular example, I have a space called PCS in the press, and where I just basically created entries for links to articles that either used my quotes or mentioned my company, things like that in the past, just to keep track of it. So now I need to move it and save it somewhere. So when Spaces shuts down, I'm not going to lose it. So what I did was I set up a database, and I started offloading things in there into this Airtable database. And in terms of fields, as you can see, I set up a first field I call a category, which is basically Google space name. You can call it Google space name if you want. And then usually, what do we have in Google Spaces? We have text lines, you know, some sort of text entries. We also have images potentially, and we have links. Sometimes we have multiple links, and we also may have replies from people that we may or may not want to keep track of. And we've got, in some cases, I, for example, was cross-linking with some information with Keep Notes, so you would have a link to Google Keep Note. And then in my case, I just wanted to enter the date these records are created, just so I have it for future use in case I want to do something with it and remember when I actually started this. So these are the fields I set up to pretty much track everything I need. Like in this particular case, as you can see, I don't really have any replies in this particular space. I just have the article link, right? And that's all I really need. So if I wanted to create an entry for me in PCS Press, all I would need to do is right-click on this link here and copy the link address right here from the browser. So I have my link. As you can see, I don't have any comments or anything. There's nothing there. Okay. And now let's go ahead and stick it as an entry into the database. So I go to the bottom and create a new record. So in this case, it's going to be PCS in press is what I called it, just like the name of the Google space. Text-wise, if we look at the text, there's really no text here except for the name of, in that particular case, it says what's the best way to communicate with your users. So if I wanted to, I could put that in. So I put in what's the best or way to communicate with your users. I don't really need to put this in because I'll have the link anyway, but if you wanted to, you could. So there's a place there. Then as I hit tab to go, use tab to go from field to field to field, it says, you know, are there any images? Now, in this particular case here, there's actually, let me make it a little bit smaller. 1 second. And let me jump into the space here. And like that. I can actually grab this image and drag it over here and drop it down here. The only problem with this approach is because Airtable can't really figure out what this is, it creates an entry in there that shows an image placeholder, but not the image itself. So if I click on this inside the record, if I click on this image, you will see it stores this little image itself. It does know what it looks like, and if you click on it, it'll show it to you. But in the database itself, when you look at the records from this view, you can see that it shows like a little placeholder. It's just the way it works, and once you understand how it works, then you can make changes you want to make them. There's a different way to get to it, which I'll explain in a minute. But basically, I just wanted to have, I don't really have to have the image in there. All I really care about is the link. So when I click on the link field and hit Control-V to paste what I copied a second ago, then the link goes there, and I don't really need any to put any other comments or anything else. I mean, pretty much all I have is a link in this category, and that's all I have. And then for the date, it's going to be today's date. So just double click on the entry and click on the today link here button in the calendar that shows up, and it sticks today's date. That's all I really want to put in. I don't really want to put anything else. And so now I have this record in place, and now I created one before, as you can see earlier. Now I created the second one, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to the third one here. So I'm going to right click on that, click copy image, and I'm sorry, click copy link address, and basically follow the process again. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to simply click on the link if you don't want to do a lot of typing. And here I can just simply copy and paste everything. So I have my URL here. I can just highlight Control-C. Then I jump into the table. And where's my table? 1 second. I jump into the table, and I put in another record here. I put in PCS in press, and just start typing. And then here, in the link field, I paste what I just copied, and then in the um, article description, I just simply highlight the article, Control C, jump back to the database, Control V, and there it is. And that's all I really want to put on, and just put in today's date, and that's it. So now I have this thing called PCS in press, and I have all my records saved from Keep. Notice I did not put the image here, right? I don't have the image. Image is not in this particular case that relevant, but if I wanted to have an image from this particular article, bad example, they don't really have any images here that show up. Let's see. What I could do this. I could take this image and save the image. Now, like I said, I don't really care about it. I don't want to confuse you any more than I have to. I already am doing a little more stuff than normally would be. It looks like it's confusing. It really is not that confusing. But the idea is you're just getting the information however you want to grab it, and then you're simply putting it into the database. And once you get in the database, then it's there, and you can get to it anytime by just simply double-clicking, clicking twice but slowly, which will make it not edit, but it will make it jump to the link itself. Okay. When I do this at home, the reason it's kind of awkward right now, the way I'm showing it to you, is like seems like it's too much hassle and it's worth. In home, I have 2 monitors, which I can't easily show you here because we have the HOA going one, and I do this on the second one. But at home, I wind up having the database on one monitor, and I have the Google Spaces on the other. And that way, the transfer information from left to right, copy, paste, all of that is much smoother because I have these 2 things open. I don't have to be jumping windows so much. And if you have 2 monitors, then it'll make this process much, much easier. But the bottom line, unfortunately, there is no way to automate or export somehow the records. You need to do it manually. And so using this approach with this Airtable allows you to essentially store the information. You have all the necessary fields you need. Like in some of my cases, like when I had some records with taxes, for example, as you can see, I wound up storing the information. And I also had some links to Dropbox that had some reports, just to show you some things. Let me just quickly show you. If I go to this link here, you can see I had tax-related information for state taxes, and it's stored in Dropbox, and it just loads it, and there's the report right there with numbers and everything else, all nicely stored from Dropbox, coming in directly. There I have some of the images also stored, so I can get to them by clicking on them, and so it's got the numbers, things like that, and you can jump between different various items related. I mean, all the images related to this particular tax return. So it's nice to be able to put it in one place where you have all this stuff. So there is taxes for 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, and so on. And so by segregating it into these separate records like this, and I would say you can, to make it easier for you to figure out what to segregate, just think about every single entry on Google Spaces. Like you have, like right here, I have 3 entries on Google Spaces. Then you would have 3 entries in the database. So you try to make it one-to-one relationship between Google Space and between the database. And so then you got the, you know what, I'm going to drop it in here into the same thing here. 1 second. So I can easily jump between back and forth. It'll be easier to show you. Close this and this. Yeah, so you can jump here and jump there. So the idea being that each item has its own line in the database, and then you can get to information such as the graphics and the links and the text. And if you have any links to keep, like in my case, I have links to keep, you have a keep link. So if you have some additional information that you think would be worthwhile that you were linking to a different application, similar to keep but something different, then you can add another field and have your database have not just text and image and links, but you can also have whatever the other field is by just simply adding it as additional field. And when you add a field that you want to link something to, the field type is called URL. So you can see right there, there is a field type called URL, which is basically just a link. Okay? So that's how that works. And you can also have attachments of any kind. And one of the attachments is images. And you can see that if you bring pictures directly from your computer, they will actually show up as little thumbnails, as you can see here. Okay, and you can control this little blue line allows you to control, purple line I should say, allows you to control freezing of information. So when you scroll through the information, you can see it's going to be like freezing cells, rows or columns in a spreadsheet, same kind of deal. So you can do it. So you can see they made it to be very similar to a spreadsheet, and basically it is like a spreadsheet, but it's got database capabilities. So now that we got our data, hopefully you saw that you can move things from there, and you just stick it here, copy paste, things like that. Once you have it in there, then the next thing that you want to do is access it. And after you enter all this information here, obviously you can see there's all kinds of different things for different purposes. It doesn't make any sense to have it all bunched together. I mean, how do you get to it? And this is where they use a concept called views. So if you click on at the top left here, you can see all the different views you can have, and they allow you to look at the same information as a form for data entry, as a grid, which is what we have, as a calendar. If you have dates in there, it'll show it up in the calendar, as a gallery, even a Kanban, which is similar to Trello. So there's all kinds of different ways how you can show information. But in our case, we want to continue to use this approach. We just want to show a subset of that information. Okay? And so the way you do that is you do it with a filter. Okay? In this particular case, let's say we wanted to set up a filter for PCS and press, right? So we have these different records, but they're intermixed with the other ones. So what we can do is we can say filter. We add a filter by clicking on add a filter, and we say where category contains, and we're going to put in PCS and press. And as soon as we start typing, it immediately filters all the contents you have and only shows you records that fit whatever you entered. And as you can see, you can have multiple categories, multiple criteria, not just one. In our case, all we care about is one. So once I do that, you can see now it shows a little green deal. It says there's one filter that's currently active, and it shows that we're right now looking only at PCS and press records. We're not looking at anything else at this point, which is exactly what you'd want to, what we were trying to accomplish. Once we get the filter set up, we can see we have things like Google Keep, this field here. We don't need any of this stuff. So what we can do is we can say hide fields, and we can hide fields such as field 8, which we're not using. We can hide Google Keep in this case from this view. And the replies and comments, we don't have any replies and comments. So in this case, we eliminate that, nor do we have any link to, so we can eliminate that too. So any of the fields that you have, you can eliminate them from the view by using this hide fields option at the top. Now we're just looking at everything that has data. We're only looking at information that we're trying to look at. So the only other thing we want to do is we want to say that we want to create a duplicate view, because right now we're actually changing our main view, and that's not what we want to do. We want to create a duplicate view by clicking on the little ellipsis thing at the very end here, create a duplicate view, and we're going to call this duplicate view PCS in press. Just call it whatever your Google Space name is. Now, when we go back to the main that has all records, notice that I screwed it up, so I'm going to change it back. Show all and filter. We don't want any filters. So now we've got main all records showing all the records in the database. And if we switch from main to PCS and press, which is right there, then we're going to see nothing but PCS and press records with all the relevant information, links, etc. Okay, so you can easily format to have only the fields that you want to have, only the data that you want to have. We're only looking at PCS and press. I could potentially, in this hidden thing, I could potentially even hide the category itself. I guess not. No, they don't let you hide that, okay, because it's the main thing. Okay, I take that back. So you can't hide the category, but you can hide everything else because category is kind of the main thing. And now we're looking only at a subset of data that we care about. So I have another subset of data, for example, for my taxes. So I select taxes and only see the tax records. And then notice that I have different kinds of taxes because I have two different companies. So one is for one is for the other. But because I set up my criteria to only look for the word taxes in category where it contains it, not equal to taxes, but contains it, meaning it can have that plus something else. Now I can actually have taxes for both of my companies be displayed at the same level. At the same time, if you, when looking at this setup, if you select the filters, you can indicate any fields you want, right, that you have. You can also indicate any of these operators that you want. So you have things like contains or does not contain, is not, is empty, is not empty. So you can use any of these kind of combinations to really create filtering criteria that really match exactly what you're trying to accomplish. And then, of course, you indicate the value it's supposed to be equal to or not equal to, depending on this operator you select. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand in English. You're saying, give me the data where category contains taxes. I mean, it's pretty easy to read this kind of filter in English and understand what it means, right? And so that's one of the ways how, at least this is what I did to deal with Google's killing of spaces, is by saying, okay, I'm going to use a database and I'm going to set up common fields that are used for different purposes within the Google Spaces, and I'm going to populate this database with all this information this way, so that way in the future I can easily access it from here. So instead of trying to worry about, for example, I could have used the PCS and press thing, which is nothing but links. I could have stuck it as bookmarks, for example, in my Chrome browser, right? Because it's essentially nothing but links to articles. So I could have put it there. I could have created keep notes to put some of this information in keep notes. So there's a lot of different things I could have done. It's not to say that this is the only approach, but because of variety of type of information that was stored in different spaces, in my particular case, I thought that the best thing to do is just to put everything into this database environment and try not to lose any of the graphics and any of the links, and any, if I did have links to keep, I have those in place. Like in case of my gifts, for example, I had this Google space for gifts, call them cool gifts. So if we go to cool gifts here, view that, you see nothing but these gifts. And as you can see, because of this dragging I told you about, the images you can't see from here, but if you click on them, you can. So if I click on this globe ball, there it is. This is for my cousin. But if you look at something like Bluetooth tracker, for example, if I click on that, then it shows you a picture of that. So that's what it was in my Google Space, and that's how it carried over here. So you can still pull it up. And then, of course, the links to them are right here. In this particular case, I don't really need to have, as you can see, link to, nor keep, nor this new field, which I accidentally created. And so it really should look like this. And there it is. There's all the information right there. And as you can see, it automatically stores everything. So I don't need to click on save or anything like that. It just, you enter the information and there it is. If I want to change information, all I have to do is double click, and then I can go ahead and change anything I want to whatever it needs to be. And once I click out, then it saves it. I mean, really straightforward, very simple. You can see in all of these entries, when you click on them, it highlights them. They also come up with this little expand, uh, which is something you can do with pressing Shift Space too, I guess it says. If you click on expand, it just gives you a box where you can have an easier view to look at that. And if you have a lot of text, a lot of information, then of course makes it very easy to edit that way. You can also expand the entire record by clicking in the category, and then it gives you this kind of view where you can really, first of all, see the history of everything that was done, and you can also make your changes here in a form-like view. And what's really important is at the bottom here, you have ability to put in a comment. And so you can put whatever comments you want to make. And these comments are not visible regularly in the database, but they will be available here. And they even have ability to be able to collaborate with other people, where you can share information with other people. And then anytime anybody makes a change or makes a comment, whoever you share it with, then you can be notified that this comment has been made, especially, and you can set it up when they mention you, or you can set up to automatically notify you every time. So it's pretty nice in terms of that. That kind of capability. So essentially, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the whole approach with going in and setting up a database. I would recommend you set up the same fields I did, where you have the set up main view, kind of having the text and the images and the links, a couple of links if you don't need more than a couple, and then answer replies come from the website. And if you have any additional things, you just simply enter them in there. And then once you have that infrastructure in place like that, then you can start populating, copying, pasting, dragging, depending on the information, things directly into the records here, and populate it. And then essentially that's it. That's how you can move off from Google Spaces into this kind of environment. You can still invite people to be able to get to this information. And the way that works is if you click on this share button right here, it allows you to do a couple of things. You can create a form view, or you can create a shareable grid view link, which is what we would want to do. So you click on that, and once you click on it, it says this is the link that you can share with other people. And the options are allow viewers to copy data out of this view. So you allow them to take it somewhere else if they want to, and show all fields in expanded records. And normally you just want to have the fields that you decided to keep open for them, so you'd leave it like that. So that's the default. You can change them. But the bottom line is there is the link. And if you send this link to somebody, then they have access to that information, and they can do with the data as they see fit. The nice thing about that is this particular sharing capability works not only on everything, but also on particular views. So if you select view like my cool gifts here, and you want to share with somebody, you simply create a shareable link, and then you give that link to whoever you want to give it to by copying, and you can send it via email. You can put in social media. You can put it basically anywhere you can share a link. You can put that link, and then people will be able to get into it and get it. Okay. Now, in terms of using Airtable on a continuous basis, they have multiple plans. It's not everything is free. I mean, you can definitely get going and copy, unless you have a ton of stuff in Google Spaces. You can certainly copy it here. So let's look into the cost, just so you have an idea how to what's the best plan for you. So initially, definitely sign up with them for free. And when you sign up with them for free, they will give you access to unlimited number of these databases. You were looking at one database. You can have unlimited number of them. So you can do a lot of stuff with that, obviously. Also, they have paid plans, at 12 or 24 or enterprise at more. You need to contact them for that, dollars a month. And you can see the difference is, all of them have unlimited bases, so you can create as many databases as you want, which is pretty cool. They have limited number of records, so it says 1,200. Um, Actually, interesting thing. I don't know if they even thought about it, because interestingly enough, it says 1,200 records per base, and it's got 2 GB attachment space per base. And you got 2 weeks of revision and snapshot. By the way, this thing works just like Google Docs, whereby, and Google Drive, I should say, when you go in to change information, it keeps track of every single change, and you can easily go back, because they have a snapshot of that particular moment in time, and you can go back and reverse the information that was done, which is really handy. I mean, that's really, really slick, especially when you're collaborating with a lot of people. It's really convenient to be able to go back to a previous version, and this database allows you to do just that. And this free plan allows you to go back up to 2 weeks. The plus plan, $12 a month, allows you to go back up to 6 months, and this one allows you to go back up to a year. But even 2 weeks for most people should be sufficient. And if you look at the limitations and you say, well, 1,200 records isn't that much, one of the things you can do in this database is link records from one base to another. In other words, you can actually store information in multiple bases, and that way you can breach the 1,200 limit record by just having multiple bases, and you have the same information, and then you can link from one to the other. I mean, it wouldn't be, yeah, I mean, it would be a little bit of work to make it work, but it's certainly workable, doable. So you can actually, on the free plan, you can actually accomplish quite a bit. The 2 GB attachment per space is the limitation, obviously, because every time you attach any kind of document or any kind of image, it counts against your 2 GB limit. And you can run out, if you store big images, you can definitely run out of room pretty quickly on that. But if you have multiple bases that you're using, then it's not such a big deal. And so if you have some way to tie them together, then you can have multiple databases, and that way you still have a free plan. And of course, if you're using it for business and you really get serious and you really like this database and you want to use this database, then certainly makes sense to pay $12 a month and significantly increase number of records and attachments per database, and also revision history. But anyway, those are the plans. The $0, $12 a month, $24 a month, and then they have the enterprise that has all kinds of additional capabilities too. They also have a bunch of templates that you can start, so you don't have to start from scratch. And if you look at their templates, let me just quickly pull those up. When you create a new base, it asks you, do you want to create one from scratch or create one from a template? And you can see they have all kinds of different categories. They have sales CRM, sales pipeline, conference planning, user studies, project tracker. I mean, all kinds of different ways. And so essentially you use that as a template to start, and then you just populate it with your data, and you're ready to go. So it's a very nicely done database, considering the fact that it's, you can use quite a bit of it for free, and it's in the cloud. They also have a mobile web application that allows you to get to the data using your mobile device. It's really nice. One of the biggest pluses for this, when you get a little bit more serious about doing whatever it is you're thinking of doing, is ability to have API. They have API where you can do pretty much utilize any kind of task that they are able to do from the API, and that of course gives you great capabilities for customization and doing things for your business, with as much detail as you want, much more so than basic capabilities and functionality of Airtable using their own interface right now. So it's real nice. So here's a couple of databases that they did as an examples that you get. As you can see, you can have checkboxes, you can have they have something with ratings. I mean, there's all kinds of different, there's another base right there that's related to this one. And as you can see, you can use different colors. I mean, there's a lot of different things they have. Like I said, we're not really today covering all the capabilities, but it is very capable database in terms of as databases go. And you can, once you learn a little bit how to use it, you can actually accomplish quite a bit. And so in the meantime, that's what I decided to use it for is just to quickly jump into it. I haven't really used it at all before. I just recently read about it. One of the other important and useful features of this database is ability to interface with services like Zapier, which allows you Zapier. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it allows you to automate some of the tasks where you can have, for example, something happen in Google Drive, and that triggers Zapier to send a record into Airtable, and so you can have this kind of automation happening uh, using this external service. I think that they also work with IFTT, which also um, is a very convenient way to automate some of the functionality that you might want to do and have the program work with cooperating with other applications essentially. So definitely recommend you take a look at this thing. Sign up for a free account, start playing around with it. And if you like the idea of moving information from Google Spaces and getting the data and putting into this database, as at least for in the interim until you figure out exactly where you're going to disseminate all of it, then this is not a bad way to go. It's not exactly a replacement for Google Spaces, but at least it's a way to store your data. So you'd have it until you figure out what you're going to do with it later on. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to call me, contact me on Google Plus. I'll be more than happy to answer them if I can. If I can't, I'll figure out the answer and get back to you. If you want to set up a community and move your stuff into a community, that's certainly a good option. Chances of Google killing the communities is pretty slim at this point. But I also thought that Google Spaces was had a great potential. It just wasn't quite done. And as you can see, they decided to kill it, just like they killed Wave, just like they killed Google Reader. Some things they create and then they kill. So the same thing with here. And one last thing before I let you go is they have a number of learning resources here. So they have this guide to Airtable. They have a bunch of video tutorials. You can ask questions. I mean, it's pretty well supported. They have a forum where you can put questions in there. And they have a bunch of videos talk about views and how you can link between databases. Bunch of other different tutorials. Let's see on video what they have here. Yeah, 12-minute Airtable guide. It's pretty intuitive. I mean, as far as databases go, it's pretty intuitive to set up and use. And if you go through some of these videos and read some of the stuff, you can see that it's pretty easy to get into it. With that, I think I'm going to wrap up here. I think we pretty much covered sufficiently here for today. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I hope this helps you. And until next time, take care.